Hello, welcome to my little trip down road testing memory lane. Another Q&A video today. Thanks very much for sending in all your questions and comments, because without all of those, then there would be none of these videos. So I've got to say thanks very much. And also thank you to all the new subscribers that have come on board recently, and all the viewers. It's just great. It makes me very happy. Last time I did a video, I was sat in a Seville hotel room, and I just finished the Honda Fireblade launch and CBR 600 launch in Portimao. And you can see those reviews online and on videos. The videos are great. They've been really well received on MCN's YouTube channel. The quality has just gone through the roof. We've got a very talented video producer called Joseph Wright, and he's making some absolutely cracking videos at the moment, so check those out. I then went off to Jerez to a Michelin tyre launch. So we tested 3 new Michelins. One was a Power 6, which is kind of an all-round sports tyre. One was a Power GP2, which fits between a sports tyre and a road legal track day tyre, or road compound track day tyre. So it's quite a niche. I guess the equivalent would be a Dunlop Sportsmart TT or a Pirelli Diablo Rosso Corsa 4. And we also rode on the Michelin Anarchy Road, which is an adventure bike tyre, but it's one that's designed purely for the road. So it's got quite heavy grooves to give it the kind of rugged look of an adventure tyre, but it's not designed for off-road really. So it's well, you can read the reviews online and in MCN and all the other Bauer publications very soon. So have a look at those. I've got to say it was quite a different launch, something very different to what I've ever really done before. And it really kind of shows a transition now between launches being run specifically for journalists, and now launches being opened up for new media, YouTubers, influencers, that kind of thing. So it was a 2-day launch, very well run, but very kind of experiential. So it was a question of, meeting all the Michelin people, finding out the specs of the tyres, getting a taster of what the tyres are like. But there's a lot of people there, a lot of people to manage. Maybe not as technical as launches of old were, but we still got to ride on the tyres, so we still got a lot out of it. There was some pretty dodgy riding on track. We rode on at Jerez circuit and on the road, and there was one chap. I mean, when we're on track, it all looks very nice. It looks like we're having a track day, but it's not. It doesn't actually work like that. Because you're rolling around, you're thinking about what you're going to write about the tyres. You're trying to absorb all the information, and you need to get pictures. You need to prove you were there. There needs to be some kind of evidence that you're on that launch. So you need to have a bit of space around you. You don't want anyone else in your pictures. And say a 20-minute session, you're going past a photographer 8 or 9 times. You don't want to waste those times by being in each other's pictures. So all the journalists that kind of know each other stay clear of each other. If you're a lot faster, you'll just overtake somebody and people will let you by, but there was this one chap from a foreign magazine, I assume it's a magazine. I caught him up, tried to overtake him, and then he let the brakes off and turned back in front of me into a corner, and I thought, whoa, wasn't expecting that. So I thought I probably just didn't see me. And then I had 3 or 4 attempts at getting past him, and he just let the brakes off. And I was like, blimey, he obviously doesn't mind me being in his picture, and I didn't want him to be in my picture. So I thought, well, I could either do a dirty move on him and carry on my way, but I thought the way he was riding so erratically, you would not believe. I thought, well, if I get anywhere near him, he's going to crash. He's obviously seeing red mist with me around. So I'll just give him some space. So I let him go ahead, and I just kind of trundled behind him really, and wasted a lot of my session going slow. And then what happened was the inevitable. He crashed, but inexcusably he crashed after the checkered flag at turn 2 at Jerez, which was just idiotic. But I managed to get close to him on that hairpin and almost ride beside him as he was sliding along on his bum to give him a little wave. So all's well that ends well. So yeah, that was an interesting launch. So one other thing I was going to say is the reaction to last week's video where I talked about all my long-term test bikes, and I was quite surprised with the amount of people that have got love for the BMW S1000R. Loads of people have had them, loads of people love them, loads of people bought other bikes and then bought the BMW again, and like I said in my video, it's sort of one of my most memorable long-termers, which I probably had the most fun on all of the time. So anyway, let's get down to some questions. The first one's from Peter Thomas 1079. Thanks very much for your question. This relates to a video I did on the GSX-R 1000, a blast from the past video where I go back and look at an old MCN and talk about what we thought of a certain bike at the time. So this relates to that. He says, do a dyno video on this bike and show us the actual results, not what Suzuki published. It would be great comparison to the 2024 crop of overt electronics and vastly differing power figures to the published articles. I still prefer a 130 horsepower SRAD to a new 200 horsepower bike that actually only allows 160 horsepower of power. I know you're avoiding this type of video so as not to ruin your relations with all manufacturers and MCN, but your advice changes daily with sports bikes not popular. You're now pushing your naked machines. Well, lots to unpack there. Let's start with dyno figures. So we don't do it so much now because it's not as important, but we used to dyno almost every single bike that came in because performance data was quite important back in, you know, the days of the sports bike. It was pub ammo, it was stuff to talk to your mates about. It was, you know, it meant everything. How much a new 1000cc made was, you know, gospel, and it was just like, what? And the video you're referring to, I was talking about an MCN where we actually did dyno the thousands, and I think the GSX-R made about 160 bhp compared to what the manufacturer said was about 180 or something like that. But the manufacturers don't lie with their power figures. So basically the reason there's such a discrepancy is because the manufacturers claimed power figures are at the crankshaft, and we dyno, we get our figures at the back wheel, and you lose power between the crank and the back wheel, you know, through the chain and the gearbox and that stuff, and normally about 10 to 15%. So our dyno figures always tally up with the manufacturer's figures if you kind of knock off 10 to 15%. So there's that's where the discrepancy lies. It's not a smoke and mirrors thing. The only manufacturers that gets close to the claim figures are BMW. What they claim is generally what the bikes make at the back wheel, which is pretty impressive. And we don't video every test we do. So unfortunately, if we videoed every single road test we do, we probably do 3 first rides and a group test every week. You know, our video channel will be massive, but unfortunately, real life won't allow that. So, but everything goes in the paper, so you can see everything laid out in the paper. And yeah, compared to the 2024 bikes, yeah, those mid-noughties super bikes don't make anywhere near the power. But you know, there's become since the S1000RR came out, we've talked about it before, we've got into this power race. You know, all Japanese manufacturers bikes were producing 160, 170 bhp up until the S1000RR, and now everyone's in the 200 bhp race. And yeah, so they're going to be quicker. But what you say is you still prefer 130 horsepower SRAD to a 200 bhp bike. I agree. I think 130 bhp sports bike is easier to ride, it's more fun, you can get closer to the limit for longer. You know, you ride the new Fireblade around the track, you are, unless you're Tommy Bridewell, you are done after 10 laps, you know. But with a GSX-R you could ride all day. So I agree with you on that point. And in terms of relationships with manufacturers, well, we've talked about it before. It's a myth, it's a conspiracy theory that a manufacturer can dictate what we write about their products in the paper, you know, whether it's a motorbike or a helmet or a tyre or anything, regardless of whether they advertise or not. You know, manufacturers or advertisers don't have that luxury. That doesn't come with their deal. You know, you give us £1,000 for your advert and we'll say nice things about your product. It just doesn't work like that. It would just blow your credibility out of the water. Something you couldn't sustain. You know, I've been at MCN 22 years. Can you imagine if, you know, we said a nice thing about a bike one year because the manufacturer was giving us some money, then the next year they didn't, so we'd have to change our opinion, and then they did again, and you'd be all over the place. So, you know, it's not workable. It's not something we'd ever want to do because that's not the job of a journalist. To the fact that we road testers have made life difficult for our own advertising teams, unfortunately. You know, they'll go into Joe Blogg's dealership and say, oh, do you want to buy an advert in this week's paper? And they'll bring up the paper and see that I've slagged off one of their bikes, and they'll go, no, look at that. And it doesn't happen very often because there aren't any real bad bikes. But, you know, it's still going to grate on people where their bike doesn't win a test and their bike's down the order somewhere. But, you know, that's just the way it is. And I don't know any other magazines or other journalists that ever pander to advertising. You know, there are other magazines and journos that are sponsored by people, but the things they're sponsored by doesn't, there's no conflict there. It doesn't conflict with what they're doing. So I think it's all pretty fair. You know, it's nice to say, I mean, I've been accused of having brown envelopes when bikes win group tests. If I had as many brown envelopes as people were saying, I'd have a 911 Turbo parked outside my house instead of a push bike. And then your final point is our advice changes daily. Sports bikes aren't as popular now. We now push newer naked machines. Well, again, that's not really true. Because MCN is a newspaper, we just reflect what bikes are out at any given moment. So, you know, sometimes we're accused of, say if Triumph bring out 10 bikes, we'll have to feature all 10 in the paper because it's news. Someone will say, oh, all you do is Triumphs. And, you know, all you do is adventure bikes, all you do is retros, all you do is nakeds. But we're not pushing an agenda to people. We're just reflecting what's there because we're a newspaper. But all interesting points. So thanks very much for your question. Right, the next one is Splund number one. Splundo number one. Anyway, thanks for your question. Do you feel that the reduced popularity of the race rep superbikes is partly or mostly down to the massive price increase for superbikes these days? 1000cc superbike in the noughties was £8,000, whereas the same thing now is 20. And combined with the fact that a race rep in the shop isn't a track-bred road-going version anymore, a Honda RCV for instance, you can't buy one in the shop, and I've seen them for £150,000. Honda don't even produce a V4 superbike for the public, do they? Well, I mean, to answer the main question there, I think one of the main reasons superbikes don't sell anymore is because of their massive price tag. You know, superbikes aren't bikes for the every person anymore. You know, back in the day, like you say, they were £8,000 or £10,000 for a GSX-R1000 or an R1, you know, in the noughties. And yeah, they're priced out of reach for most people now, which is a real shame. The other reason they're not as popular is because the average age of a rider is getting higher, and we're getting less able or willing to want to crunch ourselves up onto sports bikes. But one of the main reasons as well, having ridden that new Fireblade around Portimao, which is amazing, that bike is at such a high level, and it only works when you're going, well, it doesn't work. You only get the best out of it when you're going flat out. Riding it on the road would be a complete waste of time and leave you completely unfulfilled. You would be running around on tick over most of the time. You'd never really be able to push the suspension or the tyres hard enough for ever to really work properly on the road. So yeah, as well as superbikes becoming more expensive, they just become really extreme and kind of more and more irrelevant to normal people. And now there's just so much other choice. There's adventure bikes, naked bikes, retros, they've all got amazing performance. They got much better comfort. You've got all the technology, you've got the bells and whistles. So, you know, why would you crunch yourself up on a Fireblade or an R1 anymore when you can enjoy a bike just as much and it's more comfortable and cheaper. So that's probably why superbikes are, unfortunately, their days are numbered as kind of mass-produced kind of everyday bikes. And then you sort of talk about the racer in the shop isn't a race-bred road-going version. Well, I suppose, you talk about the RCV, so MotoGP bikes, there is no road version of a MotoGP bike. Sometimes the technology spills down. A lot of, like a Panigale will have a lot of former MotoGP Ducati technology in it. I mean, the new Panigale's actually got the 2014 derived engine from Dovizioso's MotoGP 14, his Desmo Sedici. And you've got the R1, which has got a cross-plane crank, which came from MotoGP. So there's not a lot of technology, but there's no road versions. So the road versions only come from World Superbike, where a manufacturer's got to homologate a certain amount of road bikes, and then that allows them to then race. But those bikes are nothing like road bikes anyway, because they're stripped down to the frames. Sometimes the frames are cut and shut to take out the strengthening or put more in. They need to use the same crankcases and certain engine parts, but the rest can be whatever they want. Suspension can be whatever they want. Some of the bodywork can be moved and adjusted. So, those bikes are nothing like road bikes. But when you hear the riders talk that have raced in MotoGP and World Superbikes, they say that a World Superbike is kind of soft and squidgy like a road bike. But if me or you got on a World Superbikes, they feel as stiff as a board. So, it's all relative. It's a shame Honda don't produce a V4. There was, a lot of speculation that they might make a V4 blade one day. And in actual fact, talking to Dave Hancock, who used to be one of Honda's test riders, he told me, I remember at the RCV launch in Valencia in 2015, I think, he said to me that they were testing a V5 Honda, which MCN had kind of teased for a long time. And it was going to happen. They put a V5 engine in an RC45 chassis and they were testing it, but to make it affordable for production they had to dumb the engine down so much it ended up becoming too heavy and not actually that powerful, so, and probably too expensive, so they ended up shelving it, unfortunately. But yeah, that's a shame, isn't it? But great question, thank you very much. Next one is from Chris Goes 9610. Hi Neasy, loving his Q&A sessions. Would love to see more track day tips. My question, does club racing ruin the track day experience? I'm on the fence, I can't really afford it, but told it really brings your ability along. I'm at the back third of the fast group, but I'm worried it will spoil a normal track day experience. Neasy, the go-to resource for bike reviews, tyres, tips and tricks, Q&As and many more. Well, that's very nice of you to say. I know very little about motorbikes. I just know about my little bit about, road testing, but there's a whole other world out there. So I don't profess to know everything by any stretch. But in terms of your question, club racing does ruin track days to an extent. I know that when I was racing a lot, a track day, I'd only do track days for work if I needed to, and if I needed to test my bike, actually going round and round in circles for no kind of little award at the end of it, or your name on a list above other people's names with a time next to it, unless that was there as the carrot to be dangled, I wasn't interested. And club racing does move your riding on immensely. Once the red lights go out and you're off and the red mist comes down, you try harder than you would ever would in the track day, and you're following faster riders, you're in that environment where everyone's going fast, and it brings you on. There's no question. Brings you on more than any race schools will, and it brings you on more than any track days will. So if you want to get faster, then go racing, no question. But it will spoil your track days. But now that I've come out the other side of racing and I'm not doing so much racing, I'm starting to enjoy riding on track just for the hell of it, like people do who don't race, who are just happy to ride round and round. So, what I like about a track day now is that you go along, it's very relaxed, there's no pressure to go fast. And, that's a big thing, the pressure and the anxiety and the nervousness of it all, which you get when you're racing. You can miss sessions out if you want to. You couldn't miss a practice session or a race at a race meeting, could you? So there's a lot to be said for both. If you want to just get really, really fast, go racing. But if you want to just enjoy track days, you know, go around the track with your mates, have a chat to people, and it just be a much more sort of relaxed environment and a safer environment, then stick to track days. So it depends where you are in your riding journey, I suppose. But yeah, really, really good question. Thanks very much. This one's from user W06QY3H01D. Thanks for your question. Greetings from Quebec, Canada. Have you ridden around here? No, unfortunately. I really appreciate the quality of your work and involvement. No problem. Thanks for sharing your passion. I had a 2004 Honda 599. You call it a Hornet on your side of the ocean. A 2003 CBR 600RR and a 2014 FZ09 and MT09. I bought a new 2020 Toronto V4RR 2 years ago, following your advice. Amazing experience with everything switched off. Am I really missing something with the SAC suspension? I love analog bikes and I'm sad to see that electronic rules the motorcycling world. I want to drive my bike, I don't want a computer to do it. What's your opinion about that? I missed the analog tacho too. Oh, and a few years ago you said the S1000R would be better with the shift cam engine from the RR. Now they've done it with the M1000R, you said it's too powerful for the road and irrelevant. Interested. Love your Dream Ducatis video. Safe ride, man. Cheers. Well, thanks very much for your question. So, a few things there. I'd love to ride in Canada. You got a Tuono V4RR. Excellent choice. I love those bikes. Are you missing something with the SAC suspension? No. I mean, the suspension on the standard version, which isn't the electronic Öhlins, that's on the factory version, is still really, really good. When you've got two bikes, one with electronic suspension, one with normal suspension, generally, when you're riding back to back, we did a test on the GSX-R1000R a few years ago, with and without. The electronic suspension bike is always softer because it allows itself to stiffen up when it needs to. But generally, it's soft for comfort and to find grip. Whereas a bike with manually or mechanically adjustable suspension is generally stiffer because it's got to kind of be in that middle ground between slow riding and fast riding. It's got to kind of be a compromise, whereas the electronic suspension can just be soft if it wants to be and then hard when it wants to be. So you're not missing anything out with the SACs. You know, if you've got it set up, then it's going to be the same Tuono as a factory is. It's going to be brilliant. Yeah, a lot of people are sad to see the sort of advent of electronics, but I don't think electronics take anything away from riding. I mean, in all the road tests that I do, in all the launches that I do on the road, I would say the times I ever bump into the ABS or bump into the traction control, I don't know, 1% of the time, if that, 0.5% of the time, I never ride up to the edge of electronics. Because, you know, if you're riding properly, you know, not carrying too much lean in the corners, being nice and smooth, you'll never bump into the electronics. So really, they don't affect anything. All they do is they're in the background just in case. And why wouldn't you have that? I think electronics are good when it comes to quick shifters and auto blippers, not just when you're going for it, but they're nice when you're short shifting as well. So electronics are good there. I think electronic suspension is good. I think down any given piece of road, an electronic suspension and normal suspension is virtually the same. But the ability to be able to make big changes, you know, say if it rains or if you just want comfort or you want to ride really sporty or you want to ride with pillions, to be able to change the suspension at a touch of a button is brilliant. And the latest electronic suspension is really good. And then riding modes as well, you know, being able to just have soft power if you're just cruising or sharper power if you're on track. You know, with electronics, you've got multiple bikes in one, and that's where they are. I don't think it's to take away your involvement in riding. I don't think it's there to mask the fact you're not a good rider or you are a good rider or whatever. I just think it gives you a nice layer of safety and it lets your bike do a lot of different things that it probably wouldn't do if it didn't have electronics. So analog tachos, yeah, they're good. I like them. You know, the R90 or 1290 we rode recently comes with analog tachos standard, but our test bike had a digital one on. I didn't like that. I prefer the analog. So I think there's a time and a place for that. Some TFT dashes actually show an analog dial. So yeah, I'm in the electronics camp. Although we ride, you know, our race bikes with no electronics, it doesn't really make that much difference. Then S1000. Yeah, I think a few years ago I said, yeah, it'd be nice if the S1000R had the shift cam engine, and from the RR, and now we've ridden the M1000R. What I'd say about it, the engine part of the M1000R, it is irrelevant having all that extra power, because you'll never use it. You're always below 9,000 RPM, where the shift cam's kind of replicating what an S1000R cam is, kind of mild road cams. And if you want to go for it on track, it's going to give you that ability. But what I don't like that much about the M1000R is the fact that it's got a superbike chassis set up to match the engine, which of course it has to have. So on the road, the suspension's quite stiff, the brakes are quite sharp. It's not as friendly and as easy to ride as an S1000R. So I'd take an S1000R over the M1000R just for road riding. And for mucking about as well, because the wings on the M1000R are so effective that when you're wheeling, the bike just stays solid, dead straight, and you can't really steer it on the back wheel. I know that's not a problem a lot of people are going to have, but it just kind of takes away some of the fun out of that bike. So the M1000R is just really, really serious. It's just a track tool, whereas the S1000R is more of a fun road bike. So that's kind of why I think the M1000R is irrelevant, more for the road. If I was going to do track work, yeah, then I'd have the M all day long. And that M1000XR is flipping good as well. So, but thanks very much for your question. And finally is from Ian White 3476. This is one just a bit of fun. I saw you with Tommy Bridewell and Alistair Fagan from 44 Teeth. What are the lap time differences on the same track between factory rider versus two experienced quick semi-pro racers? Thanks very much for your question. Yeah, when we did the Blade launch, we had Tommy Bridewell was there. He's testing for Honda and riding for Honda this year. We had Dean Harrison, we had John McGuinness. It's a great launch, and hanging out with Al from 44 Teeth is always a pleasure. So yeah, a lot of people talk about lap times. I kind of go back to what I was talking about earlier about, you know, when we're testing, what people's frame of mind is. I mean, when I'm out on track on that particular Fireblade launch, we got 2 sessions, and in those 2 sessions, the first session we were learning where we were going, and then the second session I had loads of cameras on me, so I was riding with cameras and trying to think about what the bike was like, trying to sort of talk about those throttle bodies, think about what they were like, and blah blah blah. So the priority to go fast just isn't there. The priority to get around quite swiftly and look good for pictures is there, and look good for video is there, but actually going really fast isn't. So, you know, I'm not going that fast on track days. Other journalists might be going faster because, you know, that's a priority for them. There are some journalists that go on track launches or road launches that have got no interest in going fast. It's not relevant for them. It's not something they're really interested in. And so we're all at different speeds, and we're all professional enough to keep in each other's way. There's no massive egos at launches. Well, there are some, but generally not. But of course, a professional racer who's just won BSB is going to be a lot faster than we are. And so I think the only way to judge the speed of us all is just to look at kind of, I suppose, racing results from the past. So I've spoken in the past, you know, who's the fastest journo? Well, I'll probably say Chris Northover right now, because he's just an obscenely talented person, a really lovely person, and just gifted on a motorbike. And I think if we were to all enter a journo race on the same bikes with the same tyres and the same suspension setup, then he would definitely win. And then in terms of the rest of us, well, we're on different kind of trajectories of our career. You know, while I was racing, I was quick, and now just without the practice of racing, I've gone downhill. Other people are on the ascent, other people are down, so it all changes really. But in terms of the actual lap time differences, I guess that if you were to put me and Al Fagan on a bike around Donington, the super stock bike, say, and then you was to put Tommy Bridewell on a super stock bike around Donington, I'm guessing the lap time difference would probably be 3 or 4 seconds maybe. And then at shorter tracks it would be less, and then at bigger tracks it would be more. But you know, that's with your kind of planets aligning. You know, you've had lots of practice, Al's had lots of practice, Tommy Bridewell has lots, you know, it's very hard to get a gauge, isn't it? But if journos were as fast as pro racers, then we wouldn't be journos anymore. And it kind of always makes me laugh a little bit that, you know, there is some ego between some journos, and the racers just must look at us and laugh because we're not as fast as them. You know, we're squabbling over who's the king of that little castle, when really, in the big scheme of things, we're just normal riders who are lucky enough to get to ride motorbikes for a living. But interesting question. But I mean, that launch was really good, really good. I wish we'd have had more time. But yeah, I'd love to go back. Anyway, thanks very much for all your questions. Thanks for your time and patience if you've got to this far in the video. So stay tuned for more videos like this. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe, and I will see you again soon.